What's going on, listeners? You are listening to the Figuring It Out Finance podcast, episode number 94, where we are going to be breaking down creative strategies for cash flow in today's market. My name is Chris Rickenbaugh, and I'm using this podcast to document my journey in real estate and business while also talking a little bit about travel hacking and personal finance. You can find this podcast on figuringitoutfinance.com, where you can listen wherever you listen to podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and where I post on Podbean. And you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Figuring It Out Finance, where you can stay up to date daily on what I am doing in my business. So today, this week, man, has been a super long week for me, just on the brain side, and keeping me up thinking late at night, trying to figure this whole real estate thing out on, keeping my finances in line and staying afloat, because we know we have 3 flips and 3 projects going on currently that are getting ready to cash out. And man, this one has been going on for 5 months now, and we're getting ready to hit that 6-month mark here pretty soon in the next couple weeks. And man, that one's been really, really tough. And I've learned so many lessons off of that project. And I learned another big one this week. If you listen to episode 93 on what happened with a supposed to be an easy wholesale deal, and that turned into a really interesting situation. So you can go listen to episode 93 after listening to this podcast. But today, I wanted to talk about it because this is something that I'm having to really look into after I've been sent a couple opportunities. I even walked one yesterday that I might be able to house hack with a co-signer, and they get the main house and I get the little ADU in the back for me and my wife while we're saving money. We're trying to travel, so that's going to be a lot cheaper option than the house we're in now, but just trying to get a little bit of cash in our pockets with these flips. But it brought up in my mind the medium-term and short-term rentals. So these are creative strategies for the cash flow. So I bring these up all the time because this is what you need in my market to be able to, be successful in rentals. If you don't want to have to put, over 20% down on a long-term rental to be able to cash flow. Because if you do that, you're not going to be cash flowing very much, and it's going to be a long-term play, which real estate is. But for people my age and people with no income, that's not something I can really do or focus on right now because I'm going to have no money coming in. I'm going to have to go work a normal W-2 job. So that is why I'm really, on the flipping right now. I'm really trying to go hard on the flipping, trying to raise private capital to be able to go after that active income. And then for the big cash out to where I have that money to be able to go put 20% down, 25, 30% down on a house, to where then I can go for the appreciation play and, buy my cash flow. So I wanted to break down, what a medium term and a short term rental is. So starting from the lowest amount of days. So a short-term rental is between 1 night and 30 nights, or 28 nights, excuse me. So 1 to 28 nights, and that is going to be your short-term rental. Somebody comes in, books an Airbnb for 2 weeks. That is going to be considered a short-term rental. So one way to be able to, or places and cities are really cracking down on those. So one way to get around it that somebody, Jesse Vasquez, he's a big person in this space, but medium-term rentals, because they're not a long-term rental. So a medium-term rental is somewhere between, over 28 nights, pretty much 1 month, to about 9 to 12 months. So anywhere in that space, you're looking at a medium-term rental. So that gets around those short-term rental laws most of the time, because you can have them basically on a month-to-month lease. And that would be counted, and it wouldn't be like a short weekend stay. It's not a week or a 2-week stay. That is a legal, month-to-month lease that gets around that rule. And then a long-term rental, it's pretty much that 9 to 12 months or anything longer that is going to be your long-term rental. So how they base it on cash flow is, the least amount of work you do is going to produce the least amount of cash flow. So a long-term rental, you throw somebody in there for a year or two, you're going to be pretty hands off because you're not going to be having those, you're not going to have cleaners. You're not going to have it like a business because you're not going to have much turnover. Medium term, you're going to be having a little bit more turnover, but it's also going to be a little bit more work, organizing cleaners, communicating with tenants, organizing leases. So it's a little bit more work on the medium term, but the short term, that is a true business to where, say you own a beach house and somebody comes and stays for a weekend or a week, you're going to be organizing cleaners, 4 or 5 times a month or more. And then it's going to be a little bit more wear and tear on the house. You're going to have to do some decorative things and make your property really attractive and be very communicative with the tenants, almost like a normal job. So, but it's also going to be able to produce the most cash flow. And it really wouldn't be cash flow at that point. It would be considered active income. So if you're trying to get out of your job, the active income is the way to go. And that's something that I've taken from Brian Lubin when he brought up, it doesn't have to be passive. It can be active to get you out of the job. And then you can start organizing your systems and processes to be able to get you out of that. But don't buy yourself a job. So that's where my mindset has been, have the idea of the business and reading a lot of books and, buy back your time. I haven't read it yet, but I listened to Dan Martell and he kind of breaks it down for you to where he's like, you have to build your business based around your lifestyle. So determine the lifestyle that you want and build your business around that. So that's forced me to kind of level up my mindset and, what I want to do in life. So I know that I don't want to be working a normal 9 to 5 job or, 80 hours a week. So it's like, all right, so you read the 4-hour work week and you're like, man, that's possible. I can work that little, but still actually make a lot of money. So that's where my mindset really changed after reading the 4-hour work week. And that's what kind of, brought me into the systems and processes. But the creative strategies, let's hop back into that. So back when I started learning real estate, they called it the 1% rule. And that was based on the cash flow. So if you buy a property, or if you can rent out a property for 1% of the total purchase price, then you will be able to cash flow. So that is the 1% rule. So it used to be the 2%, now it's the 1%, and now it's getting very, very slim to where you have to use a creative strategy. So just to explain that 1% rule a little bit differently, it's say you have a $200,000 house, you need to be able to rent that thing for at least $2,000 a month to be able to cash flow on it. So that is what the 1% rule is. And it's, when I started getting into real estate, that was a little bit easier to find. And, it still kind of worked. But when I started getting into real estate was after COVID where, house prices shot up, rent prices shot up with it. And, for what you have to put down on a house, you're not going to be cash flowing. So that's where the medium term and the short term rentals come in, because you need to be putting in a little bit more work to be able to make money off of that. So in my market specifically, I figure we're right around a hospital, so the travel nurses work, and then there's also a lot of construction. So you're having these people come in for a month or a couple months and do work and then leave. So that's where they can't sign a normal long-term lease because, they don't want to lock themselves in. So that's where they go to Airbnb, Furnished Finder, to where they can rent out for months. And it's already furnished. They don't have to furnish it themselves. It's a completely furnished unit with all the bells and whistles, and they can just leave. They really don't have to clean. And they're going to be probably a little bit nicer on your property than long-term tenants beating up the walls and beating up the property. So that's where the medium-term rental works for me, because for my house specifically, when I bought it, I was primarily focused on, this is not for me. This is not my dream home. This is for me to live here for a year or two and then get the hell out. So we're coming up on that 2 years here in 9 days. So, and we're getting really close to being able to move out of it. Once I sell one property, we can kind of put some money down on another one, or maybe get a co-signer for it. But we're getting really close to getting out of this property. But anyway, so I bought this house knowing it rented for, when I got all the money out, it was probably going to be around $1,300 a month. And with the HELOC, it ended up being a $1,900 a month payment, which is really hurting me. But when you look at the long-term rental, I could probably get $1,500 a month for it at the most, for a little 2-bed, 1-bath, 850 square foot house. But if I was able to furnish it and then put it as a Airbnb or a medium-term rental, I'm looking at $2,700 a month in this area, $2,500 at a minimum. So that's where I get my cash flow. It will be a little bit more work, but that's going to be able to pay the bills and leave just a little bit left over. So even if I'm not cash flowing on it, I get rid of a $1,900 a month payment, and then I can go house hack for even a little bit cheaper. So that was the whole strategy with my house, and I made it look nice. It's going to be able to rent out just fine once I'm out of here. So it is a very competitive market to where, you're not going to be able to put down, if you don't have the funds to put down 20 to 30% on a property, which you're getting up closer into the, probably $60,000 to $80,000 range to be able to put that 20 to 30% down on a property, $60,000 to $80,000. So you have to think about how long that took you to be able to save that amount. It's like, why would I do that? It's like, so you have to figure out how to get them cheaper. So that's where Airbnb is going to be able to produce that cash flow as well as a medium-term rental. They're going to be able to produce a little bit more, but it's not passive income. It's going to be active income, because you're going to be working on it, and you're going to have to put, like I said, a little bit more work into it than if you would on a long-term rental, and that turns people off to it. Because I have a partner, he rented out his big house. I'm like, there's no way somebody would Airbnb that thing. It's too big. But he said, man, this thing kills. I make $2 to $3 grand a month sometimes. And I'm like, there's how? And so he's able to bounce the ideas off me. So when we walked the property yesterday, he's like, oh yeah, this'll do pretty good. And then in the long term, when I move out of the smaller unit, then we have 2 units on one property, probably producing closer to $6 grand a month on a, probably $2,500 a month mortgage. So that's going to be quite a bit of cash flow to split. But it's also going to be a little bit more work. So you have to be willing to be creative in today's market to be able to produce that cash flow. And it's going to be probably active income coming in, because passive is never truly passive. Because if you have to put an hour of work into it a week or 30 minutes, that's still not passive. It's just more passive. So being able to get creative with those medium-term and short-term rentals in my market is what's going to be able to help keep that income coming in per month, rather than just trying to throw a ton of money on a long-term rental. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. So next week, I haven't decided yet on if I'm going to be posting podcasts during the Christmas week, but stay tuned for the next episode of the Figuring It Out Finance podcast. Hope to produce next week, so I got to get on my podcasting this weekend to get ahead on some episodes. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back hopefully next week, and I'll be breaking down my 2025 goals, how I'm going to get there, And I hope you guys tune in for that. So this is Chris Rickenbaugh signing off for episode 94 of the Figuring It Out Finance podcast. Thanks for tuning in and have a great Christmas.